You know, I hate overrated things. And you know what's overrated? Happiness. So today, we're going to do away with all that happiness because we're going to talk about tragedy in video games. Tragedy is a hard thing to produce in a work of fiction. There are many times that I've wept when I first saw a piece of media, but feel very little upon re engaging with it. For most pieces of media, there is a point where you will feel nothing because you are either no longer invested or are no longer surprised. So when I find something that can make me feel consistent emotions, I know it's special. For example, the feeling I get when I listen to the Island song from Adventure Time, or when Luis asks if he lived a good life in the RE4 remake, or the moment when Anne has to say goodbye to Sprig. But there are two moments that still make my chest tighten even after watching them on repeat for 3 hours in preparation for this video. So today, I want to talk about the saddest deaths in gaming history. Brodie and Roy's deaths in Still Wakes the Deep are the topic of this video. Horror games have always had a talent for creating tragic moments. A part of this stems from the size of the cast. For example, Marvin's death in Resident Evil 2 is so tragic because he is one of only 3 or 4 friendly characters in the game. The rest are all, zombies. I must say though, before I continue, I will link those 2 videos down below. In total, they're around 6 minutes. Go watch them. They're worth it. You don't really need to know the context of the 2 moments, but if you don't watch them, you'll be sort of lost because I'll be actually talking about why the videos are so good, not the content of the actual videos. Anyway, back to horror game cast size. Still Wakes the Deep has a much larger cast, but Brodie and Roy are 2 of the last surviving characters, along with their character Kaz and Finley. Brodie is the one I will be talking about first, and Brodie is also a character who saves your character's life over the course of the game. But why does his death hit so hard? Brodie's death comes down to 4 things: voice acting, soundtrack, circumstance.
The language.
I'm sorry. Little Mermaid joke is extremely inappropriate considering the subject matter of today's video, and that being, of course, dying at sea. Yeah. Anyway, to start, the voice acting is impeccable. Kaz's voice actor is stellar as always, but Brodie's voice actor puts in work. His voice actor conveys emotions perfectly. He portrays a man trying to keep himself calm in the face of an imminent death. The voice crack that Brodie has as he says that the oil is getting higher is amazing. The little laugh that Kaz and Brodie share is so brutally human. It shows 2 men desperate to try to lift each other's spirits. The second thing that makes this so sad is the animation of the characters. The way Finley hands you the phone without ever looking at you, only to slump against the wall in defeat, is tragic. But moreover, Kaz's body movements make this really special. The moment when he leans on the control panel to reassure Brodie that he's still there is amazing. The last 2 points on Brodie's death are context and music. If you watch the videos I linked below, and only those videos, you don't really get the full picture, because Brodie saved your life. I say you, I mean the character's life. And it was your character who was told to flood the pontoons, which doomed Brodie to his fate. For those of you who don't know, the pontoons on an oil rig are similar to the pontoons on a boat. They are these bits. They enable the rig to float. And he is stuck inside of them, drowning. The final thing that makes Brodie's death a tearjerker is the music. My frustration with the fact that this song just seemingly isn't part of the soundtrack is immense. But while some praise must be placed on the musicians, a lot of praise must be placed on whoever timed the file to play. The music doesn't start playing right away, or at least it was too quiet to be noticeable. I actually sat in my car and turned this volume all the way up to see if I could hear it. I think you can hear it a little bit in the background, but it's not noticeable. Instead, the music starts right as Brodie begins to tell Kaz about his home in Skye, Scotland. And this just hurts. You can feel Brodie desperately trying to maintain some level of composure in the face of a horrible, dark, and claustrophobic death alone in the belly of a ship, leaving behind his best friend and a wife and children. This, along with the swelling, purely string accompaniment, just break me every single time I see this scene. In short, Brodie's death is a masterclass of how to make someone feel consistent emotion. Well, that was heavy, but it's time for some good news and some bad news. But because we just had some bad news, I'm going to give you the good news first. Good news is we're done talking about Brodie. Furthermore, we can have the knowledge that Brodie's daughter, Mari, which is spelled in the most Scottish way possible, gets closure and gets to say goodbye to her father, depending on which ending you choose in the brilliant Siren's Rest DLC. So we can all take a breath and relax while we pour one out for Brodie. Isn't that nice? A tragic but ultimately hopeful story of a brave man dying to save his friends. Catharsis. Well, here's the bad news. Everything up until this has been the happy, feel-good part of the video. Whew. If Brodie's death was soul-crushing, then Roy's death is your soul getting crushed, then put through a blender before burning it in a volcano. Watching Roy's death for over an hour, like I did, is a great way to speedrun needing to go to therapy. Roy's death purely comes down to animation, context, and voice acting. Yeah, for once in my life, I'm not going to talk about music, because I was able to find the song that goes with Roy's death, unlike with Brodie, where my soundtrack playlist will be forever without a song, just like how we will forever be without Brodie. So yeah, screw you, insert composer name here. Yeah, I did write insert composer name here, and then decided I didn't want to actually go and find the composer's name. And I did decide to make a joke, but I didn't write that in the script because that would be cheap. But I did plan on this joke. I'm kidding, of course. The soundtrack slaps during Roy's death. I'm not joking about the whole insert composer's name here thing, though. Anyway, let's actually talk about Roy's death. To start, let's talk about the animation. There are a lot less moving parts here, but there are a few very important ones. Namely, the fact the way Roy's head moves gives you a glimmer of hope that he is just unconscious before his head slumps forward and crushes your chances at ever being happy again. The second is the way that Kaz places his hand on Roy's head. Oh man. Finally, the soul-crushing detail that Roy was trying to get to the phone to speak to you one last time, as seen through the fact that the PA is hanging off the table in a manner that showed it was pulled as Roy collapsed. And that's just... yeah. Second, the context of Roy's death is extra sad. Roy dies not from the monsters or the ship collapsing. Rather, he dies an agonizingly simple death from not having his insulin. The fact that he was the godfather of Kaz's children, along with the fact that that Kaz had the insulin Roy needed to survive, along with the heartbreaking previous talks with Roy, along with the way that Kaz went back to Roy as he refused to leave Roy behind. All of this just compounds to make a beautiful gumbo of depression, a sadness stew, a pain potpourri. You get the point. But in all honesty, that stuff is not as important as Kaz's voice acting. I say Kaz's voice acting, I actually mean his voice actor's work, Alec Newman, who also voiced Atom Smasher in Cyberpunk, which is just a weird detail. Newman does a perfect job depicting the stages of grief in about 3 minutes. You see denial as Kaz begs Roy to wake up, bargaining as he asks Roy what he's going to tell his wife and daughters, anger as he cries out at the sky, stating just how much he loved Roy, like everyone else, in defiance of the heavens themselves. Then his final whispered, "I loved him," as he accepts Roy's fate, broken by his failure. Newman captures the despair and frustration that Kaz feels, as his entire mission to save Roy was rendered meaningless. Also, to everyone saying use the insulin, Roy's already dead, and you made me feel like an idiot for asking Google if insulin can resuscitate someone who has died from diabetes to confirm that it was pointless, because I actually did that, and it did make me feel markedly dumber after typing that sentence in to Google, so thank you for that. Yeah. Anyway, go play Still Wakes the Deep. It's a beautiful and tragic game with flesh monsters, but that's not the point. The point is that it's wonderfully written, wonderfully voice acted, and wonderfully animated. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it, like always. And sorry that I haven't made a video in a while. I've had school started back up, and I've just, there's a lot of things going on. Anyway, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Y'all have a good night. Again, I don't know why I always say this, because might not be night when you're listening. It's besides the point. Thank you guys. Peace.